Welcome to the C Word, the Conservators podcast. Today we're talking about communicating conservation. I'm Jenny Mathiasson, an objects conservator based in South Yorkshire.
I'm Kloe Rumsey, an objects conservator based in Greater Manchester.
And I'm Christina, Rozeik, an objects conservator based in Cambridgeshire.
Does anyone have any news?
I've got some news which is related to today's topic. Which is that ICON are doing some professional development course in February next year, which is media training and how to do PR.
Hey, great.
So if you've been inspired by listening to today's podcast to kind of get out there and put conservation in the news and stuff, and you want some training on how to do it, then go on this course. It's on the 28th of February, Wednesday 28th of February, from 9:45 till 5 p.m, and it's in East London.
Brilliant. Well, that's really good.
And you can find the details on the ICON website, but we'll put them in the show notes as well.
Yes, we will. Hey, amazing.
And I've got some other news, which is that I've got a new job.
Yay!
Just after Chloe's got a new job.
Yeah,
I have as well. Hey, all those short-term contracts, we'll probably all be getting new jobs all the time, but... So it's a one-year contract. So hopefully you'll get a similar announcement this time next year from me. But I'm going to be an ethnographics conservator working on Pacific collections, which I'm really looking forward to.
Congratulations.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Thank you.
We knew about this already, obviously.
Yeah, but we're still congratulating you officially now.
On air.
Yeah.
Official congratulations.
I think by the time this episode goes out, I will have started. But
true. Yeah.
Excellent news.
So, I don't know if we mentioned this. This is kind of old news by now, I guess. But ICON has launched its strategy. I don't know if we talked about that before. But they have launched their new strategy document, which has an emphasis on advocacy, for example. Speaking of communicating conservation. I was going to say, the Museums Association just released its new salary guidelines. And this is basically it's kind of a stock taking of the sector, and it has kind of, I suppose it has minimum, median, and not maximum. There's no maximum how much should be paid. But basically, they've gathered a lot of data, and they've compiled these guidelines so people know roughly what people are being paid, which is a great idea. So there's a lot of research that's gone into this. And basically what came out of it was that people in museums are paid 7% below the market average.
Shocker.
Yeah.
But I don't think any of us would have guessed that.
Well, yeah, quite. In particular, junior roles are significantly behind comparative roles outside the sector. Assistants in the curator and collections management job area lag 25% behind.
Wow.
While assistants and officers in learning, programming and outreach lag 13% behind competitors. And that's
nice.
That's pretty bad.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not something that we're necessarily surprised by. I think the general reception of this piece of news was, well, we're not surprised, but what are we going to do about it? But I guess these guidelines are kind of aiming to give an accurate picture of what people are being paid and encouraging employers to please, for the love of Christ, go for the higher bands. Can we not always put people on the lowest bands?
Jenny can see my pursed lips of annoyances.
I can indeed. Anyway, I thought I'd just bring up the salary ranges for conservators. They've published a very nice little booklet or report on this, which is PDF downloadable. So we'll bung a link to that in the show notes. And basically, for conservators, first it defines what a conservator is, and then it says, notably, our research suggests that many museums are paying entry-level conservators at rates far below the minimum salary suggested by ICON. And that's not exactly shocking news. So if you go into salary ranges, it says that assistants, the lower quartile is 17,829.
Wow.
And the upper quartile is 23 grand, basically.
Okay.
All of which is below ICON's minimum salary recommendations.
Very, very much. And if you're an officer or coordinator, or basically someone who's just called a conservator, like someone who's kind of, then the range is between 25 and 29 with a median of about 27. They've compared it to other sectors where the median is about 31 grand.
Oh my God.
So that's, for example, local government surveyors, that sort of thing. So they should be similar pay grade.
Yeah.
And that to me is really interesting. I'm not paid anywhere near that, I can tell you. Nowhere near. And then we've got team leaders and supervisors, so people who are senior conservators, principal conservators, that sort of thing. That's the pay grade there is between 30 and 37 with a median of 33. I'm just thinking,
maybe in London,
you lucky.
Maybe in London, but then they've got to live in London. So.
Yeah, quite.
I think one of the problems with splitting it into assistant conservator and senior conservator is that actually most museums don't have more than one or maybe two conservators, and so there's nowhere for you to go in terms of progression. So you might be stuck on your £25,000 conservator salary for 20 years potentially, because you're never going to make senior conservator, because there isn't a job called senior conservator in your museum if you are the only conservator. So that's also another issue, is progression for mid-career and senior conservators is often non-existent.
Yeah, absolutely.
And good luck to anyone asking for a raise.
God,
after 15 years.
Well, I mean, just to put this into context, Jenny, when you were saying about the salaries for entry-level conservators, and you were saying the upper quartile, the top quartile is 23,000, is that right?
Yeah, actually £23,338 to be precise.
So to put that into context, ICON recommends that the minimum salary for entry-level conservators should be £24,648 a year.
Yeah.
So pretty much all of those jobs fail to meet.
Yeah, exactly. That's an entire pay bracket outside of that, entirely. It's kind of staggering.
I'd be interested to know whether museums are more ready to pay lower amounts for entry-level conservators because of the high demand for jobs and the experience and the perception of what museums need over what can be provided by recently graduated.
I mean, we do slightly suffer from this, where there are a lot of people applying. So basically, even if you pay someone salary, you're still going to get someone taking the job.
Yeah, so and being grateful for it.
Yeah, that is a problem in and of itself. So obviously people get away with it. That's kind of why we have people being paid 17 grand. We do suffer from that as an industry. And it's something they do address in this kind of general document, that obviously this sort of thing is a problem and we need to address it. And again, this is just a snapshot of what's happening now, but it's making people aware. And if we have this document, then we can at least advocate for change rather than go, we think we're probably being paid too little. And now here it is, like kind of black on white. And that's also important for advocacy, if you think about it.
Yeah, absolutely.
By the way, there's an even higher level of conservator, which is manager or head of. And those people range between 36 and 54 grand with a median of 44. Lucky people. Examples there are conservation and programming manager of Glasgow Life, head of conservation museum of London, that sort of thing. So it's again, it's kind of people in really big institutions in really big places.
Yeah, but to be fair, you'd be managing dozens of people there potentially, and so even that's not remotely comparable with anything elsewhere commercially with an equivalent amount of responsibility. So even though by conservation standards that sounds pretty great, but it's still not particularly comparable for the amount of skills, experience and responsibility that are demanded.
I suppose that we're also need to be conscious not to feel sort of jealous of the people who are paid that much, or sort of resentful, well, I don't get paid that much kind of attitude, because
that's dangerous.
Yeah, because then that kind of increases the number of voices saying that conservators shouldn't be paid that much, which I doubt anyone in conservation actually believes that we shouldn't be paid as much as we are, because that would be insanity. But
I think this is also, I mean, now we really are talking about communicating conservation here, because we also need to change this weird image that we're overpaid cleaners, which we're not. First of all, we're not overpaid, and secondly, we're not cleaners. Not that there's anything wrong with being a cleaner. I'm just saying we do a lot more, and we have scientific backgrounds usually, or crafts backgrounds, or something. We're specialists. It's kind of atrocious that we're not being paid for. But hey, basically, I just want to highlight that there is now a document by the Museums Association that contains salary guidelines, and that's awesome. And it doesn't really say anything new, but it does confirm things that we suspected. And I think that's it for news. So today we're going to talk communicating conservation. Who wants to start?
Well, I'm interested in what we're including in this, because I was thinking about, all right, what can I offer? What am I interested in this topic of outreach? And I was thinking about my museum and the work that I'm doing in terms of writing labels that I'll talk about later. And I did a huge bit of writing, and then I realized I'd totally forgotten about the news outreach that I'd done earlier in the year.
What you mean?
Went on
you were actually
TV.
in all the news.
I went on TV. And then when we were talking about it just before recording, you were talking about, Christina, you were talking about, in the news and how conservators get in the news. And I remember thinking, oh, no, I don't think I've ever been in the news. So I have a couple of things to talk about.
Well, I mean, personally, I've made the local newspaper as a kind of a tiny, hey, there's a conservation studio in Rotherham now.
Oh yeah,
you know, that's
advertisement kind of thing.
Well, it's kind of raising awareness, I guess.
Yeah.
With an adorable picture of me in an apron.
Oh, is there any other picture of you in an apron?
How did that come about, Ginny? Who told the newspaper that this was happening?
Basically, everything, because I work in a local authority, everything has to go through the press office. So the press office will release a press release. And at that point, I get, emailed a few questions maybe. And it's not actually even meeting face to face. It's more providing information, really, if anyone is interested in the press release. So that's kind of how everything works there. So it was more of a general thing because we were launching this commercial unit. Then they sent out a press release and a local newspaper picked it up. And that's kind of it. It's not like anyone was amazingly thrilled and came into the museum with a big microphone in my face or anything. None of that happened. It was all very sedate. That's it. That is all the media stuff I've done in terms of being accepted.
But I mean, it's good that they felt that this was worth a press release, I suppose. I mean, which obviously it is, but it is also good that kind of story is not just getting buried.
Yeah, that's true.
And that somebody wanted to come and take an adorable picture of you in an apron and so on.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, so I mean that's kind of the extent of my interaction with media as such. Now, Kloe, you have had quite a different journey.
Well, it's funny because when I set out the episode topics for season 2,
this had not happened to you.
This was May-ish.
Yeah,
maybe.
Yeah, that sounds right.
When we decided to do a second season, and we were doing on certain topics, and I was like, oh well, Christina knows more about this, and she's got all the experience, and she's done the proper reading. She can lead on this one, and I thought I'll just have to do some research, and now I've got all these scary stories. So. Firstly, I think it's fair to say I don't like being on camera. I don't really like being interviewed. It's terrifying, and I hilariously don't like the sound of my voice. But recently, as I probably definitely have insinuated before, the museum I work for recently acquired an amazing object that was super important for next year and various groups of people and the world. And again, with the press release, I had no experience. I thought press releases were only in, superhero films. And, the government, the press knew about it, right?
Uh-huh. It had gone out.
And then, so thankfully the museum I work for works with a PR agency, and they, thank God, dealt with it all. So it wasn't, obviously it wouldn't be up to conservation anyway, because we probably I don't know how to do this.
Yeah.
And then requests came in and added up.
So this was like newspapers and stuff that were saying, hey, we want to do a thing.
Newspapers came in, local and national. The Getty came in with a photographer, which was really nice. Local TV, things like that. And, with my colleague and I took turns in doing interviews about it. And obviously not everything made it in. But the thing that I was really excited about, obviously I'd got over the fear and the hatred of being on camera and actually thought this is brilliant, was when I got the chance to talk about actual conservation issues to the news.
That's cool.
Northwest Tonight. And I was talking about light levels and monitoring environmental conditions and fading and damage and all of this.
Nice.
Barely any of it got into the actual
footage.
There's editing. But to talk to to people about it was really, really good. And it was interesting because I was thinking about language that I was using and trying to stop it being so dry. Try not to use words like lux levels and environmentally stable and
quite.
But it was really, really interesting. And then off the back of that, something else that's been interesting from the point of view of being the conservation facilitation of object use by the media. I went down to the One Show the other week.
Oh yeah,
she says that so casually.
Yeah,
just
the One Show.
Just the One Show.
Well, I say it casually because I thought for a brief time that myself and my colleague would have to be on TV, holding this object aloft to various Hillary Clinton, to various political figures, and I was terrified. So the fact that we just had to, the fact that what we had to do was safely mount it and discuss with the tech team how to do that, and set guidelines that weren't either too invasive to make them decide they didn't want to bother and not too lax to actually endanger the object in any way. Yeah, that was a relief. I wasn't on TV, but it was an interesting thing to work with a team with the mind of, I have to be careful what we ask for, because we need it to be actually plausible, but we don't want to be endangering the object. I can't decide if we were more lenient than we would be for a loan, because a loan to another museum is a different type of arrangement.
Also, it's a different time scale. I mean, presumably you went down and back in one day.
On one day, yeah.
So it's essentially a couple of hours. It's a bit like, it's essentially a photo shoot.
Yeah. I would say that the tech guys and everyone at the BBC actually was really, really open and happy to have us give them guidelines, basically, and to give them rules and say, only we touch it, only we do this, only we do that. So I suppose, actually, if I was going to give any advice, it would be communicate well with the team that you're working with and get to a point where everyone's happy to facilitate what you need, as well as, showing them that you're giving them as much as you can in terms of object use.
Yeah, cool. Well, basically, you're a bit of a rock star in here right now.
I don't know about rock star.
I mean, Christina, I know that you've been on the radio because obviously we had that clip in episode 2.
Been on the radio a few times and local papers, and I've been in The Guardian in the awesomely titled article "Penises and Caustic Soda: The Case of the Cambridge Antiquities."
Oh, that's amazing.
That's so good.
That is the best article to be in.
Talking about somebody's restoration of a penis on a Greek drinking cup. So I am quoted, and my favourite paragraph from this article, sorry, I know this is about me, but my favourite paragraph in this article is, according to conservator Christina Rozeik, who has been working with the objects in the refurbished gallery, that penis will be the subject of much detective work over the next year, which apparently I'm quoted as saying.
That's amazing.
So, but it was actually a really good experience. I've had experiences of media interactions going a bit awry, because one of the things you learn is that you can take as much care as you like over what you say and how you present things and the information you give people. But as soon as you've done that, you relinquish any control over it. Yeah. You have no control over what happens. And often deadlines are quite pressing. Nobody's got the time to check stuff with you. And quite often people just put this stuff out. They don't come back and check you're happy with it, or that things are accurate, or that they haven't completely misconstrued you, or that they haven't massively sensationalized something and not focused on the conservation aspects. And so that's one of the things that can be very hard, is kind of going out there with the best of intentions and having your words kind of not twisted, but decontextualized sometimes, or misconstrued. And I think that's one of the really hard things. This article, I think, was really good. It was there as an example of something where we had an ancient object and then there were modern restorations on it, and the restorations had been made. We had documentary evidence that they'd been made by the person who collected the object, who was himself quite a significant artist in his own right, and it gave us this kind of dilemma about, what do we do with these? Do we remove all of the overpainting, or do we keep it because it's a really intimate part of that object's biography? It's very much bound up with how that object was collected and the person who owned it and his own work and his own interests and so on. So I think the article surprisingly does quite a good job of conveying those sorts of complexities and is quite sympathetic. The thing that slightly killed me afterwards was the comments underneath it.
Oh no, never read the comments.
Yeah, no, I know. And then me kind of, itching to register and start hammering my keyboard and going, actually, defending myself. And again, that's another thing. Sometimes the only thing you can do is just kind of put stuff out there and then maintain a dignified silence rather than getting into some kind of spat with somebody who's taking issue with your notions of authenticity or whatever. So I found that quite hard, actually, the non-engagement, but I did manage to restrain myself from that. So
that's one of my questions actually for you today was, firstly, how did you find the interviewers' interest in bits of nuance like that? What did they arrive wanting just sort of almost juicy goss about an object, or were they happy to think, oh, actually, yeah, this is the nuance of this is interesting?
We had a meeting. So the project was actually carried out. It was an Arts and Humanities Research Council funded project. So it was a gallery refurbishment, but there was also this whole kind of research project tacked onto it. And the research project was being done with people in the classics faculty and the university as well. And one of those people was an immensely experienced media person, and she basically got us together for a meeting before we spoke to this journalist, before her visit, and said, right, we need to decide what we're going to talk about. No, that's not interesting. That's got a hook. That's newsworthy. That isn't. And sort of licked us into shape to some extent, so that we had an idea beforehand and I think that would have been very difficult without her experience. She's one of these people who's often referred to as a media don, and has got like hundreds of thousands of followers on Twitter and is always on the news. Wow. And on on Question Time and stuff. So she really knew what she was talking about there. And it's quite galling sometimes when you think, but this is really interesting and important conservation point, and actually it just isn't sufficiently interesting to make the news. That's really hard. But I think that helped very much. And we ended up with quite a long piece, which we might not have done if we hadn't been so careful about choosing things that were interesting to the media in the first place, and then thinking quite hard about how we were going to present those things. I think we were also very lucky that the journalist who came to interview us was the Guardian's arts correspondent, and was very sympathetic and is a very sort of thoughtful, nuanced person anyway. So I think we struck it lucky there. I've spoken to other newspapers before and been considerably less lucky. So I think it also depends what the outlet is. I mean, if you're talking to the Sun, you're going to get quite a different kind of write-up from if you're talking to the Guardian's arts correspondent. That's just the way it is as well.
And can you tell when you're during the conversation how things are going? Can you tell, oh, they're just not getting the idea, how do I rectify this? Or what? How do you feel, say, more doubtful if you're talking to people who just don't get it? Or is it more of a kind of nasty surprise when the article comes out?
As I said, I think the best thing you can do is do as much prep in advance about what your message is and stick to it and try and keep it really concise. But no, I to some extent, all you're doing is putting it out there and hoping for the best, which is possibly a bit of a pessimistic conclusion. But like I said, you don't always get a lot of feedback at the time about how this is going and whether people are understanding your points or whether they're taking it on board. And I suppose the thing to think, the cliche is that it's tomorrow's fish and chip wrappers. It's all essentially ephemeral. It doesn't really matter. One of the things to bear in mind is that you're just one of dozens and dozens of other stories that are going in there today. And so from their point of view, you're not actually that important. This is your chance not to blow it, but at the same time, you're basically not very important from their point of view.
It does have I get that point. So from their point of view, absolutely. But the thing that frightened me when I was going through the sort of media storm process was that it's not like, your career hinges on what you say, but it does have implications to the conservator, doesn't it? Because if you say something that is either misconstrued or, taken out of context or whatever, and that is seen by other conservation professionals, though I'm sure that much of the community would understand that probably a lot of it's been taken out of context, or that there are reasons for whatever misunderstanding or whatever. There is the worry that, you know, other conservators will go, I can't believe she said that. You know?
I kind of feel like there's no way conservatives have time to like trawl through media and go, no, I can't believe it.
No, but I suppose if I saw a newspaper or an interview with a conservator, I'd go, "Oh, conservation's being spoken about."
I suppose we kind of I guess there's a certain solidarity in that we're like, "Oh, I'm so excited that conservation is in the media." Yeah,
and I'm interested in what you say, Christina, about having the PR person to guide you, because that's certainly how I felt myself with our PR team. But I had a moment where I felt very under pressure in one case with just basically not knowing what they wanted, and the information I got. I didn't have PR support at the time, and the instructions I got was, just what do you want? Just unveil it. Just get it out, unveil it.
That's a bit vague. That's a bit vague.
And I was kind of.
It sounds like they're not very good at communicating with you, ironically.
I think obviously they didn't know. It's not their specialism. It's not their job to know what to do. And I think they were more expecting me to kind of translate appropriate behaviour from that. And I was just I don't know what's interesting. I don't know what you want. What do you want from me?
But I think the problem is that they had something in their heads. And they did not communicate that very well. Yeah. I mean, ironically, it would have been helpful for them to say what's actually playing out in their heads. Like, I envisage that you will take it out of the box slowly and lay it out. Exactly. That would have been helpful as opposed to unveil.
Yeah. So I feel that I think even though I suppose that if you do a lot all at once, you can think, I am so fed up of being told what to do by these people and they don't understand. But actually, the number of times that I've done this sort of thing, the number of times I've worked as sort of facilitator of objects for artists in photo shoots and stuff, I'm actually happier being told what they want, what people want, and going, all right, I'm going to make this work, or I'm going to, if it doesn't work, I'm going to find an alternative that's safe for the object. You know, being told what they actually want from me rather than...
It's a two-way street.
Yeah,
it is.
Exactly.
Like, all parties need to communicate. Yeah. Nobody's a mind reader.
I think that's interesting, Kloe, what you're saying about not knowing what's expected of you. I spoke to Muirne Lydon, who's a conservator at the National Gallery of Ireland, recently, about her experience of going on a media training course that was organised by the Irish Conservators Institute. And she talked through some of the sort of useful tips that she picked up and some of the ways that she was thinking differently about it. So let's listen to it now.
My name is Muirne Lydon. I'm a paintings conservator here in the National Gallery of Ireland in Dublin, and I've been working here in the gallery about 10 years now at this point.
You recently attended a media training course.
Yeah, so this media training course came up it was offered from the Irish Conservators and Restorers Institute, and it actually just piqued my interest when it originally came into my email because... And I'm sure a lot of other conservators will probably agree. You regularly are pulled up to do interviews, to do like podcasts such as this, from anything from conferences to giving short talks to pop-up talks to. I think as a conservator, you're frequently called upon to talk about your work. And I was saying to a colleague of mine who was attending the training as well, even though I had done a lot of interviews, a lot of work with our website team here, a lot of presentations, I actually had very limited, in fact, no professional training in this area. So I thought it would be a really good opportunity to do that and just really update my skills and see if there's anything I can be improving upon. So with the course here in the gallery, I do a lot of work with our digital team. So we put a lot of our projects up online. This can be anything from podcasts to blogs to short little videos of projects to in-depth technical reports on bigger projects, let's say. So I wanted to kind of get more information and learn more about, say, some new available apps that might create a better profile for our projects online. So that was why I was quite interested in attending the course. And then the other thing I wanted to address was things like how to be best prepared for public speaking and how to overcome nerves or that type of thing.
What kind of things did the course cover then?
So we had two ladies from the digital media side who discussed the purpose of blogs, how to increase traffic to your part of the website, how to get as much traffic, call to action buttons with videos and signing up to blogs or podcasts, and then they went through a lot of really good apps that I wasn't aware of at all in relation to easy ways to pull together things like time-lapse videos of projects.
Oh, wow.
So quite good apps. So some of the particularly good ones, which I've just looked at very briefly since the training, there's apps called Snapseed and things like Canva and PicMonkey, which are particularly good for, I think a lot of the time when you're doing stuff like blogs or websites, you're caught up with the admin of it, like resizing images and that kind of thing takes up a huge amount of our time. So Canva and PicMonkey are just quick apps for resizing images and really quite useful. And then there's another good app, which I've just looked at this very briefly now since this workshop, Splice, so SPLICE, which I thought was very good. And it creates professional looking videos that you might have from time-lapse. You might take like a photo every day of a project that you're working on, or maybe something you're painting, you're cleaning, or an object you're cleaning or retouching. And then this app will pull together all of the photos at the end of the project to quite a nice good looking video that you can put up online. So just really kind of handy practical tips. And just actually, I thought another thing they suggested, just really kind of obvious things that you might not always think of, but also like for conservators or a conservation team that might be working on projects to come together and develop a content calendar, because that's one of the things that we have here in the gallery. We might start a big project that could go over 1 or 2 years, and it started in great earnest, but then to kind of keep up the momentum and to keep up fresh content can be a challenge when you're busy actually doing the practical sides of the project. So things from the get-go to develop a content calendar and schedule, will just help you ensure consistency of good fresh input, and I suppose saves time ultimately in the end. And then the second part of that was basically about public speaking and interviewing and giving presentations. And he dealt with just, tips to deal with if people were speaking too fast in interviews. Handy tips like put a red sticker up at the top of your page, which every time you look at it, it reminds you to breathe, which is always very helpful. Things like to be careful about leading questions, the obvious ones, if you're being interviewed about like funding in the cultural sector versus funding in other sectors, and just how to deal with them in the best possible way. I mean, I think really what was being spoken about time and time again in this is preparation, and how when you're talking to somebody publicly about your work, how if you have, you might have like a 3-minute interview or something like that, 'cause usually they're quite short. But if in that time before you're interviewed, if you've time to sit down and think of 5 sentences in relation to your project that you want to get through to the public, that you have those 5 perfectly worded, perfectly sensible sentences that you can rely on if you're getting a little bit tongue-tied or whatever in an interview, and makes you sound much more coherent and limits any jargon, I suppose.
And I guess it helps you make sure that you really get your message out.
Yeah,
because
absolutely.
3 minutes is such a short time to explain something complex like a conservation project.
Well, and how best. Actually, the presenter in the course was talking about, time and time again when he talks to people, things like mindfulness, breathing techniques or whatever are recommended. And he was saying time and time again, that's a waste of time. You just have to be prepared and know your content. And the best possible way to explain and illuminate and highlight whatever information you're trying to get across to the public. But also actually, what was quite interesting was, we did a lot of, practice interviews, and each interview was geared towards whether it was like a light entertainment afternoon show, or whether it was 6 o'clock news, or whether, and so basically to know your audience, that's what he was saying, whether we can go with your hard hitting facts, or is it something a bit more lighter, for, you know, the 11 o'clock coffee show on the radio or something like that, or versus the 9 o'clock news. So, you know, to kind of understand who your audience is also very important.
Did you get any tips for dealing with more sort of hostile interviewers?
I think the thing is to be honest at all times. That was flagged. Like, no, to not feel like that you have to be dishonest about anything that you're working on. But like, so say, to give an example, one of the questions touted was, why should we be investing so much money in the cultural sector when our health sector is in a terrible position, or you know, and the obvious response to that is, well, absolutely, both sectors deserve funding, and both sectors are also very important. But I'm here today to talk about the cultural sector, which is important from a society and a cultural perspective, and we would hope that people would agree with that. So not to be defensive, I suppose, is the best way. So no defensive behaviour, and best honesty that you can possibly portray in relation to project.
So what did you learn from the training that you think you're really going to be able to put into practice during your work?
Okay, well, I came back quite enthused about tackling our website. Here in the gallery, we have just reopened our historic buildings. So we've just finished a very big refurbishment and development program that's gone on for, you know, the past 7 or 8 years. And in tandem with that, we've done, you know, like a facelift of our hanging, and also our kind of public profile. So, of course, our website has been all updated and renewed, and a lot of our old content, which I think at this point our old web had been up for maybe like 8-9 years, had needed a bit of a facelift and had lost some freshness and had lost some direction. So it was actually a really good time for me and for other staff here from the gallery to go to this workshop, because it gave us a renewed enthusiasm for putting up projects and creating public interest in the conservation department and the work that we do here. So yeah, I would certainly be more interested in doing more short videos of projects and more blogs, and working more with Instagram and Twitter as well, because they seem to be, from building up a public profile, the videos and seem to be much more popular than you know, being long technical reports, and it's more of an instant. It's like the web. I think this is one of the things that we discussed is changing, where it's much more about short sound bites and faster information, and not going into a huge amount of detailed information. And I suppose if people want more detailed information or more technical information, they'll be going to the professional conferences or going to the journals or whatever's coming up. But whereas the web is more for quicker public information, that seemed how that was working. That's what I took from the workshop.
Mm-hmm. Is there anything that wasn't covered that you think it would be useful to do?
No, to be honest, I thought it was a really good, valid workshop. I was really pretty pleased with it, and I thought it was really helpful. I came out of it thinking more conservators should do this, because actually, in fact, we're all so passionate and committed to our area, and it's such a vocational area. In general, we're all quite good at talking about it, and I think that's conveyed in the projects that people discuss. But it's always good to kind of update your skills and see what else is out there as well. So no, I was very pleased with the workshop. Actually, I thought it was a very good refresher, and it just gave you a lot of good new tools and information for improving our public profile.
But it's not something conservators get any training in at all.
No, absolutely.
And you suddenly get
absolutely
kind
not.
of dumped into these situations.
Yeah.
So
yeah. Actually, it's funny though. I really do have to say, like, when we did our practice interviews, like, everybody was brilliant. You know, we're all like, I think because of the areas we're in and the types of training. I mean, I know from going right back to my undergrad and then my postgrad, you're always being pulled out to do interviews and talk to people. So, you know, we do have good, you know, hit the ground running experience with talking about our work, because we do have limited funding, and we do have to fight to keep our areas up there and valid. And I think a lot of the time with conservation or these kind of cultural sector areas, the preservation of these areas is down to the advocacy of the people working in them. And we have to work quite hard to make sure that work is kept up there at the forefront, and ensure that advocacy of all this terribly important work that we all do is present. So anyways, no, I think it's definitely a valid day for conservators, because especially, I mean, you're always talking about your work, and it's not, it's just nice to get some formalized training.
Yeah.
Because I've been in situations where I've done interviews, and like literally, 30 seconds before going in, I'm told I'm not to cover this, and this comment, this, and that can throw you a little bit when you're about to go on air or when you're about to speak to somebody. And it was just about, depending on the project, people are under pressure with media and how to deal with it. And it was just like good to get those tools to know best how to respond to maybe difficult situations as well. But we're lucky. I mean, we're lucky in conservation that we get to talk about great projects. So we don't really have to work terribly hard to get that hook, because there's already a huge amount of public interest out there for the type of work that we're doing. I mean, I think we're really fortunate in our professions in that capacity, and we get to talk about the really interesting, nice things, where we're not talking about, the terrible things that's going on in the world politically today. So I mean, that's we're already starting on a positive note, I suppose. That's what I'm saying.
Well, Muirne Lydon, thank you for talking to the C Word today.
Okay, you're welcome.
I just want to say, speaking of that kind of soundbite thing, it's an interesting, not worth putting in the episode, but I just thought it was interesting that an elevator pitch is incredibly useful to have in conservation just in general, because, and this is ridiculous business speak, but the idea is that you need to explain something to a person while you're in a lift with them. That is an elevator pitch.
That's brilliant. Yeah, I think we should put this in the episode, because that's really interesting.
Oh, thanks. But it's because this was something I encountered when I started my job, where I work in an organisation where people mostly don't understand what a conservator does, or why it has any value. Mm-hmm. So you kind of need to devise a quick way of explaining what you do, or why it's valuable, or why anyone should care. And you kind of need to always be armed with that, along with your business cards, and just kind of be like, this is what I do, and this is why it's important. And so that's similar to the soundbite idea, that you just kind of, I know it sounds ridiculous, because we all know that conservators are important, but other people don't. So you need to package it in a quick fire, tiny, bite-sized little way. Just a little taster, just so people understand that I do something valuable. There you go.
I think I was really heartened to see that there was the media training going on recently in Ireland and in ICON, because it is increasingly something that conservators are being asked to do. We're being kind of brought out from our underground bunkers.
It sounds so valuable. Blinking
in the sunlight like like the underground dwelling creatures that we are. But we're increasingly being brought out to explain conservation and to do this kind of thing. And it's not something that is generally covered in our primary training as conservators, and it's something that can be really hard to pick up on the job. I mean, you don't want to be learning about presenting your work on television the very first time you're asked to go on television and present your work on television. Ideally you'd have some sort of backup, whether that's support from a PR company or training or something like that. So I think it's really, really important actually that we get these skills, that we're able to make that elevator pitch, that we can
definitely
present ourselves engagingly and demonstrate what's important about our work.
What can we say about what we do now? Because I think by doing this, I mean, it is a bit of a tooting our own horn thing, but I do think having a podcast, obviously we do this because we think it's valuable and we think that it needs to be done. So that sort of goes without saying that we think it's valuable and important. But specifically having an outlet, having a sort of platform for discussion and something that people can tune into in and out of the discipline, kind of, I feel, sort of reasserts a community and a community spirit, particularly with different age groups of conservation and within different disciplines within different disciplines in the profession and issues and everything. So we're not communicating conservation to the outside world, but communicating it to the inside world is a manner of outreach.
Well, so to be fair, this episode is about communicating conservation even within the profession.
Yeah.
So I mean,
it'd be ridiculous not to talk about ourselves.
Yeah, exactly. So
we're amazing.
Modest too. But I guess what I'm trying to say is that communication within the profession is also valid. So yes, we have a podcast. Thank you for listening. There are people on YouTube. There's obviously things like blogging, so other conservators can read about your treatments or the problems you encounter or the research that you're doing. I mean, there's traditional ways of communicating conservation, which is very, journal articles and
news,
book publications and that sort of thing. That's also valid. I just think there are many more channels now. Obviously, face-to-face can be a bit trickier because conservators are quite... They come in clusters, certainly. Did we agree there was the consolidation of conservators? Is that the collective noun?
Aww.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes.
But we don't all come in groups. We can be quite geographically dispersed. So there are now more ways to communicate, and face-to-face can be a rare occasion sometimes.
Yeah, absolutely. And when it isn't at a conference,
Yeah, but conferences are kind of mad and crazy.
I was going to say, I was trying to think of a way to say it.
Conferences
I'm terrified of conference networking because...
Conferences are great, but scary.
Yeah, there's so many people. How are you supposed to you can't speak to everyone.
Yeah.
As
someone who is slightly on the spectrum, I have to say, being surrounded by a really large amount of people who are all talking to each other and at the same time juggling coffee and cakes, it's too intense, and you also have to kind of sledgehammer your way into a group because normally everyone's already clumped together, or you have to find other floaters like yourself where it's just like, hello, I don't know anyone, hi, do you know anyone? No. Okay, excellent. I mean, it's hard work, and it's terrifying, and it's scary, so it's valuable and awesome, and it can be fun, but it's also terrifying.
But I don't think there's that many people who would mind you approaching them to talk to them about their presentation in more detail or to ask questions or stuff.
That's true.
I've approached people completely cold, as it were, at conferences. I know who they are because they're wearing badges, which is very handy.
That is true. Labelling people is handy.
And I've had people come and approach me after presentations I've given, and I really appreciate that because you don't get any feedback otherwise, and it's a way to kind of extend that conversation.
No, that's true. That's true.
I don't think you have to kind of necessarily feel you have to insinuate yourself into a group or wait to be introduced or whatever. I know I keep saying this, I keep banging on about it. It's fine to just email people out of the blue. It's fine to just contact people.
Yes.
Really, most people don't mind. Most conservators are lovely, lovely people who will help you if they can.
Yes. So how about signage and stuff like that? How do we communicate conservation?
That's too obvious.
We should talk about it.
Sorry.
In museums and heritage settings, like how do we communicate if it's not face-to-face with the public, for example? Well, I'm thinking labels and signs and stuff like that.
Something I wanted to talk about as well is a completely different type of outreach, I think. Because when you think outreach, you think of conservators standing next to a sign or a billboard or something and greeting the public and, hello, this is a face-to-face discussion. But I've recently been doing some work and some thinking about how to communicate the issues in conservation basically as a method of preventative conservation.
So this is gallery stuff?
In galleries, specifically. And there's I've done quite a few other bits and pieces at events and having a, conservation station and, that's all
I love
very
that.
Cool. It's so super cute.
Yes.
But I'm interested in the use of signage as a way to protect collections. And there are a number of really nice examples. I particularly like the National Trust's use of their signs and their little labels and things that say things like, be careful with me, I'm delicate, or acids on your hands or oils on your hands can cause damage. Please don't touch me, kind of thing. Because it's cute and it's a way of getting out bits of conservation information.
That's true.
So, as context, the museum I work in has a lot of open display textile material out all the time. The galleries are invigilated, of course, but there's only so much you can see, basically, with even one or two or three or four people, you can't see around all the corners all the time. So essentially the objects are touched. We know they are, and we're trying to prevent it or do more to communicate not touching,
It's interesting that you say that, because I was recently at World Museum in Liverpool, and they have a lovely Egyptian exhibition now. Oh, it's so lovely. But I noticed that as soon as there's an absence of a sign saying, please don't touch me, people just go for it. Like,
right?
People love touching things because they had some great statues, obviously stone and stuff. I mean, we only worry so much about stone usually, depending on what the object is. But they had some, they were clearly on a plinth, they were clearly inset a bit. So I felt like everything subtly tried to say, it's here. The option is there, but we're not encouraging it.
Yeah.
But at the same time, there was nothing saying don't. Oh, and people went up to that and, they really went for it. It wasn't like a little, I'm touching it. It was, I'm smoothing my hands all over this. It was like, I just stood in a corner going,
That's it. Because I think I've heard a lot recently from loads of different sources. We don't want to use negative language. Yeah. Don't say no, which I think is a hilarious sentence. No use of the word no. And that's basically that's the struggle. How do you communicate? Don't fucking touch the things. Without it sounding either negative or aggressive or patronizing or, because obviously we know not to touch the things. But if people are, in previous museums, I've said to people, please don't climb on that. Or, I'm sorry, it's very unsafe for you to be doing that. Or, please, we ask you not to touch this. Yeah. And the response is literally always, I didn't see a sign. As it, does that mean we have to have signs? Because if museums are trying to move away from having do not touch signs in their galleries, then that's going to be constant. And that frustrates me. So the tiny rant over. And I'll now talk about what I've been proactively trying to do.
Yes.
Basically, in a way, copying the kind of ideas that the National Trust have of providing a bit of information. And of course, I don't say that this is the only example of this sort of strategy use, but it's a nice example because the number of different National Trust properties I've been in tend to use the same sort of methods, and I find it really nice kind of blanket communication. So providing a bit of information about why, and basically you still get to say no and don't, but you sort of fluff around it and put the negative words, the evil negative words in context, so people feel like they're being taught or feel like they are gaining information as well as receiving an instruction not to do something. So basically, I've just been writing a series of labels based specifically on an object, on each object. So trying to pick a feature of the object that is either delicate or going to be ruined or something, and saying, have you noticed this? This will happen to this if you do this kind of thing. Or this will get worse, or this is like this, or this bit's fragile, or, have you noticed kind of thing. To try and use active language as a way of getting people to think about what they're doing and to think about their own behaviour in terms of the lifetime of the object.
How many words, how short are they?
This is I should have brought along some examples.
Because people get bored very easily.
Yeah, well, and I think I'm in a good position that the space that I have to fill is quite large. And I hope to use imagery as well.
Will there still be the image of do not touch, like the hand crossed out?
Probably.
I'm genuinely curious because I know that people are very visual. So if they might be more likely to read the text if there is a visual clue to go with it.
This is what I'm thinking. Yeah, so I have yet to design.
But I don't want to influence what you're doing. Sorry.
No. I have yet to design that sort of imagery, but that's definitely on the list of things. So I'm trying to basically make it a habit to communicate bits of conservation information about each object as a way of stopping people from touching stuff. Basically, my concerns are, as we've already discussed, is it patronizing what I'm saying? Saying things like, this is fragile, we ask you not to touch because of these reasons. Is that the kind of thing that people just go, whatever? or that's insulting, or I get people's backs up. I don't want to do that. Are things too long-winded, as you say? Will they just stop reading?
Are you going to do like a little pilot with this where you ask like 10 members of the public, or, you know, like, what do you think of this?
That is an interesting idea. I had not thought to, because I feel like I'm running out of time for I have to start this.
We're always short on time.
That is a really good idea. I'm going to write that down. I'd be interested to see what people do actually think of it and have a way of allowing people to feedback. The thing I'm mainly concerned about is that it'll have the opposite effect, and actually pointing out areas of an object that is delicate will make people go, ooh, I'm going to poke at that to see. You know? The
reverse psychology effect. Oh, it says not to touch it. I must touch it now. Well, to be honest, sometimes I feel like that.
I mean, maybe this is a case with some people, but I suppose people who will touch an object after they've been... yeah, exactly. People who will touch an object after they've been asked not to will probably touch it anyway, regardless. Yeah. So maybe I'm overthinking it.
Maybe. If any listener has any input, then, you know, send some ideas.
Yeah, what have you
or if you've seen good examples.
Yeah, I'm up for examples. I'm up for language use. One of the things that I'm particularly interested in is language use and what people respond to using words like delicate and fragile and dusty and, you know, dirty, oily. That's another thing. And another thing. How do I say the oil's on your hands, or your hands aren't as clean as you think they are? That kind of thing. Without being offensive.
Yeah. You've got dirty hands. You don't even know it.
Don't touch the things you're disgusting, you know.
Yeah, quite. This isn't so much about science, but about kind of the visual effect, I guess. I quite like what they do in some historic properties, which is they put like a pine cone or a thistle on a seat just to signal, do not sit here.
I think it's really, really nice. It's really elegant.
Yeah, I love that. It's very kind of gentle in that it's not a giant sign, but it's still like, clearly you wouldn't want to sit on that, right? Yeah. There's a reason it's there. Think about it.
It's sort of gently humorous, particularly the thistle.
Yes.
It's just really sweet. Yeah.
Today I'm reviewing something a little bit different. It's a book called The Interactive Past, Archaeology, Heritage and Video Games. It's edited by, and I'm so sorry I'll get this wrong, Mo Arise van de Meulenbroeke, Boom and Polytopoulos, and is published by Sidestone Press. It might seem a little odd to talk about heritage in video games, but if you stop and think about it, it's really just about public image and a kind of outreach. How do people experience archaeology and heritage virtually? Whether they're building monuments in Minecraft or revealing excavated artifacts in a minigame on their smartphones, these are encounters with the past or a representation of the past. It could be the player's first experience with the notion of archaeology, or it could be one of many ways they already engage with heritage. I'm genuinely impressed with this book because it's both academic and fun. The authors of the various papers come from both the heritage sector and the game development industry, and they delve into their research with great enthusiasm. The book is divided into several parts, covering overarching subjects such as ethics, game design, and games as a form of outreach. The book even addresses how to preserve games themselves, and how gaming can be incorporated into exhibitions, which is something we've actually talked about here on the podcast before. There are so many examples of great storytelling in this book, games describing other cultures and mythologies, strategic games allowing players an insight into ancient societies, and ones which allow people to collect artifacts and piece together a narrative, not entirely unlike the detective work that goes into actual archaeology and curatorship off-screen. Tricky questions are also addressed in the various chapters. How do we address copyright of a game if part of it was developed by an indigenous community group? Do we worry about representing looting and illegal trading games? Each chapter ends with the standard bibliography we're all accustomed to, and also a ludography with the video games referenced. While many of these are already familiar to me in some form, I find myself wanting to have a go at some of these games, now that I've read about them in a more anthropological manner. I think I can safely say that games about the past were influential on me as a kid. I played games like Pharaoh for hours on end, and it's definitely one of the reasons I became obsessed with Egyptology. My undergraduate degree was in heritage studies, so I know a thing or two about this kind of literature, And this is hands down one of the best heritage books I've ever read. I thoroughly recommend it to anyone interested in heritage, archaeology, and or video games. It's a brilliant and diverse read, and it really has a little bit of something for everyone. My only complaint is that museums didn't feature particularly in the mixture, but then maybe there's just not very many games set in that kind of environment, although I can think of at least one example. This is a paperback edition with 235 pages and full colour illustrations. I absolutely love the cover artwork. You can purchase this book in the UK from Oxbow Books for £40, or as an ebook from Sidestone Press directly for around €10. You can also, astonishingly, read it online for free. Anyway, thanks very much to Oxbow Books for sending us a copy.
Dear Jane, conservators always seem to say they're quirky and odd. I've been thinking about joining your ranks, but my concern is, am I just too normal to be a conservator? Signed, Emma.
Emma, you asked me if you're too normal to be a conservator, and I admit I know almost nothing about you, but never let the lack of data stop an opinion. So, are you too normal to be a conservator? What I know about you, Emma, is that you like to be called Emma, and that you listen to or are aware of the C Word podcast. I'm afraid I'm going to have to just work from that basis. So, are you too normal to be a conservator? I think the only thing that I can suggest to you in this situation is to get a bit closer to conservators. Find out what they are and what they do. You're listening to the podcast already, but are you wearing knitwear, and is it purple? Apparently we do allow other colours in knitwear. But you've also found out from listening to the podcast that conservators have a fascination with the smells of dust and adhesives and old books. Do you have any such fascinations? Do you like the smells of old things? Are you just ever so slightly obsessed with how things work, what they're made of? Are you really keen to get your hands onto some of the old stuff? Do you have a love of the heritage or the culture that you just can't quite shift? When you go to a museum, do you spend ages looking at one thing? Are you looking around to see how the museum works? I can't answer these questions, Emma, but perhaps you could get involved with a conservator, volunteer somewhere, spend a little bit of time with them, perhaps join ICON as a supporter, or a professional body where you live if you're not in the UK. Perhaps go to a conference and see what they're talking about.
One of the ways that people define normality is in relationship to the people around them. So why not get a bit more involved with conservation practice by volunteering in a studio or workshop? Spending some time with the conservators, you'll start to discover whether you share their interests and fascinations, whether you're gripped by the minutiae of exactly where something should be sitting to make something look just so, not perfect, but not neglected. If you spend time involved in conservation, whether through training, volunteering or helping, I'm sure that you'll do two very important things. The first thing is that you'll help contribute to the conservation of the cultural heritage of where you live. And the other thing is that you will grow as a person yourself. Spending time with doing conservation means that you'll be able to practice your hand-eye coordination, your fine motor skills. You might be able to do some colour matching. You'll learn about team working, project management, resource allocation, working with clients, communication, and a whole range of other skills that should you decide to leave conservation at the end of your experiment, I'm sure you'll find absolutely invaluable. So, if you get involved with the conservators, you can look around, see yourselves amongst us and say, am I normal? Do I fit in? If the answer is yes, we'd love to have you. Over and out.
And now it's time for some comments, questions and corrections. I just wanted to give a shout out to the people who got back to me about ways of dealing with my masking tape problem, especially Rebecca. That was very helpful. Thanks very much. And also I wanted to give a shout out to Justine, who wrote in to us about freelancing and how the gig economy can actually be very beneficial to some people. And there are object conservators out there who are freelance and who are successful. It's not all bleak and bad. And that is a very good point. I can't go into detail about the example she gave me because I don't have permission to talk about them. But there are sunshine stories, and basically people shouldn't feel discouraged just because they're object conservators. There is a place for you in the freelance world, basically. So thanks very much for sharing that, and hope you keep listening, Justine. And yes, I think
I'd like to do a little shout out to Samantha, who got back to us about the modern materials episode and emerging professionals episodes, and particularly was a belly dancer.
Yeah,
so
you have found.
Hi,
you found another belly dancing conservator.
Another belly dancing conservator. I absolutely encourage you to get back to classes. Do it.
That is a Venn diagram that is rare. Conservators.
So thank you so much for your email. That was really, really nice. It put a big smile on my face.
Yeah. Again, we don't give shout outs to everyone who emails us, because we get a surprising amount of emails. Thanks very much. We love hearing from you. And please know that we do read everything. Please don't be discouraged even if we take a while to respond, because we all work on top of this and it takes us a while to get back to you sometimes, but we do read everything that you send in, and thanks very much. And we do love hearing from you, so keep emailing and tweeting and all that stuff. Basically thanks for listening. We're the C Word, and you've been listening to Christina Rozeik, Kloe Rumsey, and me, Jenna Mathiasson. Join us next time for an episode about food. In the meantime, check out our website at thecword.show, tweet us at the C Word Podcast, or simply email us on thecwordpodcast@gmail.com. The intro and outro music is Spring by Didi Music, used under a Creative Commons Attribution license. Additional music and sound effects by Callum Robertson. This has been a Wooden Dice production.